Hi.
Hi, Lenore. Nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on
Yeah,
today.
it's great to be here. Sorry, I was just making a last minute update to my presentation. So yeah, it's good to join you. I had the opportunity to listen in yesterday and I really enjoyed a lot of the conversation on leadership. I got some LinkedIn tips. So I want to thank
Oh, yeah.
you and Glorium for inviting me because it's a great forum. I have my fan blowing, so do I look like I'm in the? Just
You look
my
just
AC
fine.
is not set up, but yeah, it's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone here.
Perfect. Glad to have you here.
Do you want me to put my presentation on screen?
Yes, please, by all means.
All right, give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Let me do it full screen. How is that?
All right, I can see it.
Actually, I guess I can do it. I can do it the full way, then I just can't see you. Sorry, wait, give me 1 second. Okay. And then I'll go full screen. All right, great. Well, as I said, it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I am going to be talking about the elements of essential growth marketing. Can I just ask a question? Adam, how do I do the presentation and still see you? I don't know how to do both of that, because if I do full screen, it takes up everything.
Sure. Well, as the screen is right now, I can see your presentation, and I can also see both mine and your screen as well.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So can you see it? Because it doesn't. It looks like it's now off. You can see my cover page on the screen. There we go. All right. Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Good. So anyway, delighted to be here with all of you talking about the elements of essential growth marketing, and I am looking forward to talking with you about this framework and also giving you a little bit about my background. And since we have a little extra time, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So excited to get into it. So why is startup growth different than other forms of growth? Well, what makes the startup space sort of even more intense is the expectations of 15% or more a year annual growth. So I like to think of this as survival of the fittest, survival of the fastest, and survival of the smartest, right? It's not just about, coming up with a good idea. It's really about making it to the finish line. And that requires a certain amount of ability to really be able to.
Oh, hi, Lenore. Just to interject quickly.
Strategy.
Oh, hi, Lenore. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi. The team is just requesting that you go full screen with your presentation.
Okay. If I go full screen, I can't see the comments, so that's the only thing, Adam. So jump back in and let me, just say something, because it takes over my full screen. So, okay. Great. So thank you for that feedback, and I'm going to turn the volume up so I can hear you better. Great. So, just getting into the differences here. The fittest is, how lean are you? How strategic are you around managing your resources, your finances? How fast are you? How quickly can you pivot and get to market? And then the smartest are the ones who do that combination of both, where they really focus very early and very quickly on the right clients and the right product market fit, and then are able to execute. So these elements are key to being successful. And here's why, those things are so critical, is the statistics are pretty sobering, right? Only 2 in 5 startups are actually profitable. And then 1 in 3 will break even, and another 1 in 3 will only lose money as they continue to scale. And of course, that's for the ones that make it, that lucky 10%. As many of you may know, 90% of startups fail, 10% within their first year and 70% within 2 to 5 years. So what's going on? Why is it that startups fail? There are many reasons, but here are the top 4. Over 40% actually don't really understand their marketplace. Either they anticipate there's a demand when there isn't, or they go in the wrong direction and identify the wrong segments to focus, so they're not able to adapt quickly. Obviously, funding, as we talked about, is so key. So a lot of organizations will run out of either outside funding, angel money, or seed investment, or for those who are bootstrapping, they just don't have enough money to keep it going. The founding team is actually a very critical element, and I see this a lot, particularly in my work with co-founders and high growth organizations. You really need to have a strong group of leaders are able to work together effectively. So this can easily disrupt a company that's not set up to do that well. And then in the last situation, sometimes the competitors are faster, smarter, and sort of hit the nail on the head, and that can happen very easily. I've seen companies that have 2 products, and in one case, the product that was better, arguably it had better technology and better value for the customer, wasn't as successful. Why? They didn't nail their marketing. Or the other business kind of capitalized on a segment and was able to get traction and then expand from there. So these are just some of the elements to be thinking about as for those of you who are in high growth companies or looking to work for high growth companies, or just thinking about the growth overall of any business you're working with. So my goal today is to share a growth framework that I've used to highlight some of the challenges that we've already started to look at around what comes up for companies as they're exploring a growth strategy, and then what are some successful ways that you might be able to address the challenges that arise. So just a quick background on me. I'm a growth guide for navigating change. I really am an expert in starting, scaling, and shifting. That's the work that I do as a strategic consultant. I've acted as an outsourced chief marketing officer. I'm an executive and leadership coach for a number of high growth companies and leaders. And my background was more than 20 years as a corporate marketing executive. I was the spokesperson for 2 publicly traded companies, 10 mergers and acquisitions, and an IPO. So I've been in the space a lot. My expertise tends to be in B2B, helping companies to position themselves as a change agent. I've launched over 100 products and services, and in a lot of my work, I started my own business 9 years ago. I've acted as a startup advisor, mentor, and judge for various venture competitions, working with different accelerators and incubators. What I like to say is, I've been through the growth process. One of the companies that I was at, I helped take from 150 to 300 employees. We then went public and were acquired by a company with 50,000 employees. So I've seen what that's like to grow and scale a business. I've also worked with spin-offs and independent subsidiaries, and also, very early stage and funded startups. So I've seen the range, and then having run my own business, that gives me a particularly unique perspective into what it really takes to get something going. So what I find is sometimes with startups, there's this chicken or egg challenge. And this comes up for many different businesses. But what will often happen is there'll be a business idea, a product, or technology, in search of a client, right? So, you know, some founder has this idea, they think it's great. Now they got to figure out who's going to buy it. So this happens a lot. There's nothing wrong with this strategy. It just means you really have to hone in on the right markets quickly in order to get traction. As a marketer, our goal is to understand what clients need and offer them an elegant solution. So I call that sort of the sweet spot. You know, you'd say the gold star, in this case, the green star, but that your solution is actually really addressing a need that exists in the market. The reason this is so important is then you know the client needs what you have to offer. So you'll hear me getting into this a little bit more. The 5 essential growth marketing elements we're going to be looking at today are starting with the why. Like, what is the mission of your organization? This is the fundamental underlying basis for why your business exists. That is key. From there, we want to make sure you got your who in place. Do you have the right people to bring your vision to reality? Then there's the what, your position. What is it that you're doing, you're offering? What do you stand for? When are you going to bring it to market? That's your timing. And then which offering, the product. So these elements are key to a successful growth strategy. And we're going to explore each of them in a little more detail. But it's essential to be thinking about all of these things, because when you don't have them all in place, you kind of can struggle. So a successful high growth business has the right people, focus on the right mission, delivering the right product with the right positioning at the right time. Right. So what can happen, I've seen in certain situations, you have an amazing product, but you haven't figured out how to articulate that differentiation, and maybe you're too early, so people don't buy what you have, and competitors who come along later might have a different way of approaching things. You can have amazing people, but if your product sucks, good luck. You're not going to find a market for it, right? And just because you have a big vision, like we want to change the world, that's amazing. But unless you're able to translate that in a way that makes a tangible impact, it's really just a dream. So all of these things are really essential. So here's the framework that I use when I'm working with both individuals and organizations, because I actually think both are key, right? An organization without individuals who are aware and leading is not going to be particularly effective. And leaders that find themselves in an organization that's not aligned with their vision aren't going to be able to be as successful as they want to be. So I actually work with organizations and individuals in both ways. So the focus areas that I care about are the mission, the message, the market, and then manifesting. So that's really where I spend my time. And then how I work with people is I help them to realize, where are they now? What is it that they want to create? Where are the gaps? And then what could be possible? And in order to get to that future state, often they need to release. It can be letting go of old approaches. It can be letting go of the wrong people on the team, the wrong strategy, the wrong market segment, attitudes that aren't helpful, so that they can really focus on their strengths and go after new opportunities. And often that involves reimagining, creating new possibilities for them to move forward so they can be both authentic and aligned. So a lot of my work with organizations is particularly around this repositioning process and rebranding, helping them step into what they really want to create so they can be more effective. So let's get into the mission. So I think it's essential to start from the inside out. Why does your company exist? What's your purpose? What is the big change you're creating? And then do you have a really clear vision that everyone understands? So, just to give you some examples of big visions, some of you may have heard of the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. So you want to really think of the impact that you're going to make. Are you trying to change an industry paradigm, creating a new business model, transforming workflow processes? Maybe you want to improve the transparency through data in your business. These are just some examples. And here are some real-world mission statements that can be really helpful. So Amazon is striving to offer customers the lowest possible prices, best selection, and utmost convenience. And for those of us who are Prime customers, we know that's kind of what we're getting from them. Patagonia, a visionary company I'm a huge fan of, their vision is huge. They want to save the planet, and we experience that in how they operate, how they design their clothing, and everything about their philosophy is reflected in how they look to really run that business. Facebook is helping people connect with friends, discover what's going on in the world, share and express what matters to them. I think their mission is some sort of personal empowerment platform. Obviously, they sometimes have other objectives, but that's what they aspire to. And Netflix, not being shy, wants global entertainment distribution service to be the best in the world, global domination, right? Nothing wrong with that either. So knowing what you want and really aligning what you're doing around delivering this is so key. So the challenges that come up, often organizations really aren't clear on their vision or purpose. And until they get that alignment, for the people who work there, it can be sort of confusing. Like, are we going after this customer? Are we focused on the product? It's sort of hard to identify with a company when you're not really sure why they exist. And this also leads to, sometimes it's just a product in search of a customer. That is fine, but a product does not a business make, right? A product can be an offering, but that's different than really delivering long-term strategic value that's sustainable. I often find that new founders will have an idea with the goal of selling immediately, right? That's okay, but using an exit strategy to drive decisions also can sometimes work against long-term sustainability. And related to this is when you only focus on your price and profits without delivering true value for customers, that's where you can have challenges. So always come back to what is the customer need that you're solving and what is the impact that you hope to make. So the next aspect we're going to look at is, do you have the right players? Who is on your leadership team? Now, clearly, you want the right individuals throughout your organization, but the leadership team are really the drivers. They're the folks who are helping to set the strategic direction. You want to make sure that they've got the right expertise, they share in the vision, they have the same values, and the priorities for the business are really clear, so everyone is on the same page. I've seen that co-founders who've worked together in the past often have a playbook that they use that helps them to be really successful in moving forward. Having relevant industry expertise is super important. Having a great attitude can go a long way when you're early in your career, but really when you're trying to target specific industry segments, you want to know you've got people that understand it. Now, being outsiders can work to your advantage too, as long as you know how to execute. And I've found that particularly early on, companies will bring in generalist folks who are good at doing a lot of things, but as a company scales, you really need to have the relevant expertise as you're growing. So in that case, specialists may be needed. And having a strategic advisory board can be super helpful in bringing in some of that outside experience when needed. So challenges that I see come up and companies struggle with is when the roles are not clearly defined. So again, early on, everyone's doing a little bit of everything, but as the company goes, it becomes important to differentiate who's going to be managing the client relationship, who's doing sales and business development, does somebody own the marketing strategy, right? And then communicating the expectations. This is what we're going to do. These are the growth metrics that we're going to go after. Super important. Companies don't often understand what are the true drivers of their revenue. And so sometimes they focus on the wrong things. You know, open rates and click-through, that's great, but if people aren't actually using your service over time and re-engaging constantly because they're doing other things, that's not going to help you get the traction you want. Sometimes this cultural element is pretty critical and sort of subtle, where the norms are clear. Okay, we expect you to work 8 in the morning until 8 at night, but they're not explained. You know, oh, we have an open door policy. You can tell us, you know, whatever you want. But when that's not enacted, you know, that creates conflict where people believe they're going to do one thing and they find something else. So creating agreements about how we're going to make decisions is key. Listen, there are CEOs who own the process. They're going to make the last call. That's fine. They should make that clear. I decide. If you're trying to be collaborative, though, you really want to make sure that that is, in fact, part of your culture and DNA and how your company operates. Otherwise, there can be this lack of accountability where things don't get done and nobody's called out on it or called in on how they can really do what they need to do. And as I mentioned before, having a great attitude is really helpful, but if individuals don't have the skills you need, they may not be the right fit for your organization. This is actually one of the hardest things for founders early on is, you know, they bring people in that they like, but that person's not the right fit and it's hard for them to let the person go. But truly that is the right thing for the organization, and knowing when to make those calls is key. And so you need the right talent for the growth stage that you're at. Now we're going to talk a little bit about messaging. So the key to messaging is knowing who you are, define your strengths. What is it that makes your company unique? How are you different from your competitors? What is it that you care about? And having a distinct point of view can really make a difference. So a lot of the ways companies differentiate themselves is by being better, faster, or cheaper. These are some of the, you know, the most common. But if you can help your clients to increase their sales, be more profitable, be more successful or efficient in their business, are you delivering something in real time that they used to have to wait for, and you can give them superior outcomes and demonstrate results, that is going to go a long way to helping them want to work with you. So some different models or ways of differentiating have been, okay, it's a SaaS model, or we have a subscription platform. We help you do things much faster because we can get up and running within weeks instead of months. We have a full solution that includes not just the technology, but the service and support. I mean, I see a lot of the online platforms now, everything is virtual, but that doesn't mean that they're giving you the level of support that you need. So solutions that really ensure that when you implement something, you're going to be successful, that can make a difference. Are they solving a challenge in a unique and different way? This is when you're really a disruptor in your industry and trying to get people to think differently about things. You know, there's a learning curve, but if people get it, that can really be a game changer. And I think it's super important to own who you are. You have tech company 1, tech company 2. They have a similar product, but fundamentally they will be different. Some companies have, a huge focus on technology, some focus on marketing. One is not better than the other. It's really a question of knowing what is it that you are best at and then leading with it. So what is it that makes your company unique? The challenges that I often find are companies want to copy other market players. So they're new to a market, they see the leader and they think, oh, let's steal from their playbook and try and kind of go against them or, do something that they see working. That's okay to a point, but it's hard to become a leader if you're following what someone else is doing. So you need to know what's your secret sauce. And you need to promote the real differentiators that make a difference to clients. So I had a client I loved working with. They were brilliant technologists. They came out of the gaming industry. Their tech kit was superior to anyone else's in the industry. They had like a 99.99% uprate. They didn't want to talk about it because it wasn't 100%. And I said, are you kidding? Your competitors are at like 97%. Like, why wouldn't you let people know in an industry that cares about reliability and stability that you are way better than the alternatives available? So knowing what's true for you and what makes you distinct is super valuable, because when you don't communicate it, people won't know. So communication makes a difference, and I really recommend focusing on what you do best. Let's get into the marketing a little more. So marketing can really help you stand out from the crowd. And knowing who your audience is can also be helpful. So choosing an industry vertical, knowing which country or region you're focused on. Things that are true in the US are very different than other markets, Asia, Europe, Latin America, Africa, right? It's different in different countries. It might even be different in different states, right? If you're operating in Pennsylvania, the laws and the regulations might be completely different than if you go to Alabama. So you need to know where you're operating, why, who you're going after, what types of companies, what are their distinct characteristics, and then ultimately, who is the target audience and decision maker that you need to be connecting with. So in some cases, you want to go for the CEO, but if you've got a technology solution, maybe the CTO is your decision maker, or the chief revenue officer, or the chief operating officer, or some other CXO. But you need to know for the service and product and solution that you have, ultimately, who is the buyer? It isn't always the CEO. They may be an influencer. So you really need to know who does make the ultimate buying decision. And owning that niche can be helpful. Having a distinct brand personality. When I work with companies and we help them define their brand, it's always really helpful to look at the competition out there. What are they doing and what makes them different? Because every company really does have a different personality in terms of how they present themselves, their leadership team, the topics that they talk about. So knowing how to set yourself up to be different is helpful. So also thinking about where and how you show up and being selective about your channels. You don't need to be everywhere, right? Of course, it's helpful when prospective clients see you in different places. I love surround sound, but when you're starting out, sometimes it can be very helpful to choose a certain channel that you're going to focus on and really try and own that to differentiate yourself. So this is something I think one of the speakers yesterday may have mentioned. We can't be all things to all people. That does not serve us, right? We are much more effective when we are something to someone, right? They know who we are and what we have to offer them. And they choose us because they know that we really understand their specific needs. It's important to understand your buyer. Where are you in their purchase process? Have they already made up their mind when they come to you, or can you influence them earlier on to motivate them to make a change and use your service? You want to know, where are they? Are they at industry conferences? Are they online? Where online are they, right? So going where they are is the best place to build those connections. So a lot of startups that have technology and product expertise don't always understand the marketing aspects, but having a consistent brand, it's powerful leverage, because when prospective customers see you, if you are the same everywhere you show up and that has an integrity to it, then you come across as authentic. When you're unclear, or you sort of look different everywhere you are, your colors, your logo, your brand, your message, people aren't going to get it. You actually have to work twice as hard to cut through. Whereas if you streamline and focus, you can be more like an arrow and hit your target. And also some other elements here are speaking the client's language. I see this happen a lot with companies that enter new markets. They don't always understand who they're speaking to and how it might be different than where they came from. And I don't just mean that if you're moving from Spain to France, you have to switch from Spanish to French. I mean, if you move from one industry vertical to another, often the jargon and lingo in your new industry may be completely different. So the last thing I would say is, understanding how your buyer behaves can be important. So making sure you really know who your ideal target is and understanding how to reach them is important. All right, let's talk about how to manifest. So this is called making it happen, right? How do you engage your clients, right? When and where are you connecting with them? So timing is important. Being with them at the point that they're making a decision, getting ahead of that is critical. Having my own business, it's always so frustrating when I realize somebody has already, chosen some option because I was too late to the game. So getting in there and sort of building relationships so that people consider you as one of their options when they're ready to pull the trigger can be important. And being in the right places is very essential. So many businesses early on will find strategic partners, and understanding who is going to refer you, who are other influencers, can make a difference. So you might want to be considering vendor integrations if you haven't. That can be particularly powerful for many technology providers. Linking your product to important events, knowing when, if somebody or if a company is going through some change process and your solution can help them, linking what you do to that can make a difference. Are there important milestone dates that you want to align around? And can you find fewer channels that you go deep in where you really build your community? So again, we talked about, do you understand at what points your buyer is making decisions? What are the triggers for their decisions? And can you get in front of the key decision makers early enough? So make sure that you can really explain the value of your product. I work with a lot of sales organizations, and sometimes they don't always know how to articulate what it is that makes them different and the final impact, right? They can talk a lot about the products, features, and functionality. We use this technology and But if you don't explain, well, once you implement our solution, you're going to increase your revenues. You're going to have a faster turnaround time. You're going to be able to respond to clients. Like, that is key, being able to describe the benefit. And sometimes we focus on the wrong people. Maybe here we try to influence, let's say, the CEO, when really the ultimate buyer is, somebody who's in an operations role or the technology officer. So make sure you understand your key buyer behaviors. So just to wrap up here, successful high growth companies identify a clear target market. They understand their buyers. They can demonstrate and explain to end users the value of their product and benefits. They're integrated into the client experience and the market. They really understand the space that they're playing in. They've got the best talent. They're able to execute. They can drive user engagement to achieve their performance goals. So just to summarize, what I hope you took away from what I've shared is, the more clear you are on your goal, it's going to help you. Having a focused mission makes a huge difference. Defining your customer means you understand your market. Knowing yourself means that your product has a clear value that you then communicate through your message. When you hire great talent, they will help you. I'm thinking here, sometimes you can actually accomplish more with less people if you have the right people, and that is invaluable. Finding the right channels and being there at the right time will help you to manifest if you stay the course and execute. So, just to wrap up, I'd love to hear where you will focus and if there was anything that you learned from what I shared, and if there are any questions that you have. And I am going to stop sharing and come back to the group.
Got it. Well, I have to say, Lenore, that was an excellent presentation, very enlightening. And in fact, off the bat, I have a few questions. Certainly some of the points you raised, made me think of a few things. So, when it comes to you could say the founding team, obviously having a very, you could say, well-oriented and positive founding team is very, very important. And just anecdotally speaking, through my experience, when it comes to founding teams, having that great morale can either be the most empowering thing, especially, in light of maybe, let's say, lack of, resources or time, but a negative morale is easily one of the most, destructive elements, so to say. So I'm wondering, within your experience, what are some of, you could say, the preemptive red flags you could perhaps offer and articulate to a startup to kind of maybe see these things well ahead of time? Because sometimes it seems like in startups, because there's so much chaos, things either creep up either because everybody's so busy, because everybody's kind of wearing this very almost like this generalist jack of all trades type of hat, or B, everybody has their biases, because a lot of times people start these ventures with their friends or their classmates or people that they just already know.
Actually, I've dealt with those situations
plenty
of times. I think pretty early when there's tension. And I would say the biggest issue that I see is there's a lack of agreement and clarity around who's going to do what and how we're going to make decisions. I think putting that in place can make a huge difference. So first of all, particularly friends dealing with friends or people who don't know each other, sometimes they get uncomfortable setting up founder agreements. But if you don't put that in place, you're not protecting yourself, you're not protecting your organization. So that's okay, the legal, if we decide to exit, how do we manage it? But even at a more basic level, who's going to make the ultimate decision? Is it we need unanimous majority? Is the CEO going to call the final shots, whatever. So that can be a starting point. And if you feel the tension and you're not sure you can navigate it on your own, because it can be very difficult when you're dealing with power dynamics.
Right.
So in those cases, bring in a coach, someone who can moderate and guide people through. You want to have a neutral and safe space because these things are so emotionally fraught, not to mention, there's often money involved and people's livelihoods. So you really want to find a way to come together. I always believe there's a way through, but sometimes it can be helpful to have someone facilitate that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to the mission, element of your process. I've consulted on projects where I've said something along the lines of, "Why are you doing this?" And I either get two responses, and this isn't actually as an insult. I really feel this is like a learning experience for everybody. But I get either crickets or it's kind of like, this is a life changing idea that's going to change the world, and it's going to be. So I find myself at times in a situation where it's like, okay, we have to break these down. We have to break these down into smaller things. And so we can articulate this and really ascertain who we're looking to, market this and provide this either product or service to. But I will say, sometimes that process gets a little rocky because I think there's a lot of feelings or ego and a lot of, I guess you could say, emotional, psychological investment in it. And I am relatively new at this, but seeking your expertise, how have you guided people through that to articulate their why? Because, like I said, in my anecdotal experience, I've gotten either crickets or kind of like these emotional whirlwind type of discussions, and it takes like a significant amount of energy to then just kind of steer that back into place.
Yeah, it's well, you've definitely highlighted many aspects of the team dynamics, right? Which are, the ego and sort of I find it can be very hard to say, we don't know who we're going after. And then let's take some time to figure it out, right? That's a very strategic focus. It can be hard for people to do that. Why? In a startup, you're running out of money, you have pressure to execute, right? So you get focused on the tactics. But taking that time to actually identify, well, why are we doing this? It makes a huge difference. And because then you actually know this is where we're going. This is our audience. It's like your North Star. It helps you make decisions on product features and everything. So I do think that that's an underrated place. And sometimes it takes companies until they've got 50 employees and they realize, oh my God, we better put this in writing. But I think the sooner and clearer you can be, at least on what your initial vision is, the better. And then, I liked your example of the oh, we're going to change the world. Well, that's beautiful. I love a big vision. But let's bring it down to reality. Like, what's the little thing that you're going to deliver in the short term? You can have the bigger vision, but the mission is, all right, what are we going to do now? Maybe the mission changes, but the vision, it can shift. Maybe you think you're going to do one thing, you go down that path and you realize, oh, we're just not getting the traction. You might need to change, right? But at least start going in a direction that's clear so people can get on board with it.
Right. And kind of going into that as well. So I've done quite a bit of pitching in front of VCs and to a lesser extent family offices. So I've worked on numerous white papers before, and I think that kind of goes to kind of articulating and filtering the vision. But kind of going on to some of what you said, I've also encountered situations where I've, at least in my practical experience, will change things on, let's say, a white paper or pitch deck, because I'm thinking to myself, the person on the other side of this conversation, what do I think they want to hear to make this as intuitive as possible? To make it easy on the listener. I've also, in my experience, have gotten pushback where it's like, no, if you remove this, you're removing like the heart and soul.
Yeah.
And I've kind of had these conversations where I'm like, listen, we can't be thinking in these terms quite just yet. We want to make
Yeah.
this very digestible, at this
Yeah.
point as well. And I was, like I said, some of those kind of end up being kind of more difficult, conversations, to
Yeah.
have, to say the
Yeah.
very least, kind of changing those, changing those aspects.
Yeah, I would agree. The messaging is super important and not so easy. Like it
Right.
takes a lot of work to simplify to the core. And that's where the mission vision is super important. So when you know who you're targeting and why and how you're going to help them, then you align your message with that. This is where I think, again, a lot of technologists, love them, they're innovative, creative, but sometimes they don't understand that it's not about the technology, it's
Right.
about the benefit. So it's really about not that you're a SaaS platform that's leveraging AI and crypto.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
who gives a shit? Like, so is everyone
Right.
else.
Yes, exactly.
Like that's great, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Like who are you helping and how and why did you choose that platform? Like it doesn't ultimately matter like how you're doing it. What matters is your impact. So yeah, I mean, I think that people underestimate the importance of the message because it's hard to get to that, and it's not always people's strength. But the more time spent on that, the better. And you've probably seen this. Who gets funded? But the folks who kind of have the clear message that everyone gets, right? Like
make it easy for the listener. That's
oh yeah,
my main sentiment. At least when I either advise or work in that type of capacity to fine tune things. Make it easy for the listener. Make it as intuitive as possible, where somebody can make a decision as soon as possible. I think. I think this is a term we've all heard in school, but oftentimes less is more, and kind of actually, as you said, with teams, it's sometimes actually better to have a smaller team of just very efficient people versus just kind of too many people, and it's just kind of too much to I don't know, manage or organize or whatever.
Yeah, I would also add on the point about the message is you do need to know your audience, right? So a lot of founders don't realize that they need different messages depending on who they're speaking to. So the things you say to the client are not the things that you're going to say to a funder or the things that you might say to a customer or let's say a media person. Like you need to have different things that you communicate in different environments in different ways. So I came out of trading and financial services. Like traders, I used to say, they have the attention span of a gnat, right? If you can't say what you need to say within 10 seconds, like they're not giving you the time of day.
Like
so
an abridged elevator pitch almost. It's like it's
yes, you need your hook. Yeah. Yeah, you need to know what people care about and why. So sometimes having that big idea really can make a big difference.
Wonderfully said. And my follow-up question is actually one of, I guess you could say, the big M's in these situations.
Yeah.
Money. These are often very, difficult and muddy waters to navigate. So I'm wondering, from your expertise and your experience, how do you deal with startups who are very passionate, but are either, have little to no funding and, big goals, but very, you could say, vague tactics to getting there? Like how do you I guess my question is, how do you remove people from their ego and say, listen, this is what it is right now based on what you have?
I'm assuming you're asking as an advisor. You can only say to people what you observe, and they will either listen to you or they won't. I've actually seen it on both sides, right? So I've worked with startups that had really big visions and and then burned through their cash and went out of business. And then I've seen founders that had conflicts about, well, we're going to spend money on the office and painting it this, and I'm like, is that really where you want to focus your limited resources? Like, seriously? And actually, it paid off because they were able to get more funding and it didn't matter. So I think it's sort of figuring out what is it that's going to move the needle for the business and sort of prioritizing, what is going to help us get to market, get more customer, like, focusing on the metric like that. If you can't really draw a direct line between how this investment is going to make me bring in a new customer and increase my revenues, then it kind of is like, okay, well, is that really the best use of your time and money and effort?
Right. And, the points in your process you mentioned, I like the fact that you have all of these ingredients and you could say gears in this machine clearly defined, and I think that is very, very important. I think it actually lowers the anxiety of people when they know exactly what they have to do,
Yes.
and there's less of a chance of burnout because as often in many startups, everybody's kind of wearing numerous hats and everybody's running around doing many things. So it's kind of hard to maybe regulate. So my question kind of goes to, some of that. So you mentioned generalist versus specialist, and I'm glad you mentioned this. This is a very, very great point, and I feel that at times, let's say with the startups who unfortunately nosedive, there's almost like a mismanagement in execution. When to use the generalist, when to use the specialist. How do you advise and troubleshoot teams that are bringing on generalists and specialists either at the wrong time or in the wrong context? How do you massage their way through that process?
Yeah, I actually put together a whole resource for this because I could see this is the area I think founders struggle with the most, is like, how do I bring in the right talent, right? I think you want to be really clear on what you need, right? Like, do you need a specific skill set to help you accomplish an objective that you have? So for example, sales, it's a really clear, so like people who are good at business development, right? It's not that you can have people who have not done sales before. They just may not know how do you sell and close a deal, right? Or technology, like this is a big one I see. Founders have an idea who are non-technical. They think, I need to bring in a CTO co-founder. And I always say to them, well, why? You don't want to just hire someone to develop it for you, right? Sometimes having a co-founder is a great idea, but other times it's not necessary. So I think it's really, in every situation it's different, but I think what's most important is understanding exactly what is needed for the business. And then when you meet the people, defining, do they have the skill set I need? They may not have the right skill set, but they might have a great attitude, which is, and then you can think, I'm going to keep this person in the back of my head for a different stage and I'll bring them in later. Or you're going to say, okay, I may, maybe you start with a group of people who are great. This happens a lot. And you realize a few months in that certain of the co-founders or the founding team aren't pulling their weight. You need to be able to say, here's what you were brought in to do. Here was your role. You're not doing it. So either you need to start doing it, or, in another month, we're going to check in and revisit because this may not be the right place for you. Like, people's goals and priorities change just because they're on board now. Maybe they have a family, so you don't know. So it's kind of important to be constantly navigating that process.
Got it. And very well said. And as to one of the other M's you mentioned, marketing. I liked how you, I guess, more or less conceptualized and articulated that almost, for a team to stick to a few things and be good at that, and instead of maybe, let's
Yeah,
say, trying to be everywhere, all the time at the same time and whatnot. So, in your experience, would it be
yeah,
like, would you suggest to a team, listen, if you're marketing and it's social media, just stick to Twitter and Discord, or Instagram and YouTube, or whatever else. Is it fair to say that overcommitment or over marketing or I guess overexerting yourself in the marketing, that has a drastic downside too?
yeah. I think it's not. It's more that I guess what I've seen is organizations that aren't really clear on what they want to
Right.
do down for impact. So I
Yes.
think the more focused you can be on, again, who you're going after, why, how, building those relationships, going deeper, it's going to stand you in good stead as you look to get the traction that you want. I don't think, so for example, I mean, I see this, let's say, with people who have their own business.
Right.
Folks focus on all the social media channels. Well, maybe you
Right.
don't need to be on TikTok and Instagram and
Right.
like pick one. Maybe you just focus on LinkedIn. Like that's enough.
Sure.
Or maybe you don't even focus on LinkedIn. You just do your individual outreach. And I'm a fan of relationships over transactions. So that's what I liked
Love
about
that.
one of the approaches that was shared yesterday. So I think you just need to figure out like what's your model.
Very well said. And I was wondering if you could perhaps expand a little bit more on having like some sort of, strategic, advisory team, almost like, kind of almost having, a either a mentor or almost a group of mentors, in an advisory capacity to,
Yeah.
to navigate. Like, how does one start, finding those
Yeah.
type of professionals to, help in a startup?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways to do this. So the one thing I do often say is, free advice is worth what you pay for it, right? It's
Very good point.
so
Yeah.
sometimes having mentors can be great. They can be other founders that you go to who have been who are a little ahead of you on the journey that can inspire you and give you feedback. It can be a group of founders in a mastermind. I used to run a bunch of founder roundtables, and that was a great way to learn from others who were dealing with the same challenges and how they had handled it.
Right.
Strategic advisors, if you know you're going after a particular market segment, you might want to identify an industry luminary who could be interested in what you're doing and invite them to join your board. And then you want to figure out whether and how you want to compensate them, right? Founders often love helping other founders, so that's more of a mentoring relationship. But
Right.
strategic advisors are often in a paid capacity, whether that's actual cash or equity. And then, again, I'm an executive coach, but a lot of my clients consider me a mentor because I'm an objective third party who's holding space to guide them to what's best for them. And sometimes that means exiting their business or shutting down, or like you can't go to your investors and your board and be like, we're not bringing, like it's hard to do that. So sometimes
Right.
having someone who really has your back makes a huge difference so that you can be supported, not just like intellectually, but like emotionally in whatever you're doing. I mean, having a business and being responsible for other people's money, other people's livelihood, it's a huge, it's, I don't want to say it's a burden. It's a beautiful obligation, but there is a lot of weight to it. So just knowing that you have other people who can be a sounding board can be super helpful.
Awesome, and that's definitely some very valuable information there. And if we can go back to money and funding a little bit, is there a time frame, so to say, if startup is going about to create, implement assemble their team and build the MVP, is there almost like a set amount of money, or at least a time frame in which they should have the entire operation funded for?
I used to hear that you wanted funding for 18 months of runway. So for example, when you were going to raise capital, you
Right.
would want to raise for 18 months. I found a lot of startups didn't do that. If they were
Right.
going out to angels, they would just need enough they would say, oh, I just need enough to get going. I mean, I think you just got to be practical, right? You got to look at the money you have, and you got to try and execute something that will at least get you paying customers as quickly as possible. So sometimes that actually means scaling back your
Right.
initial offering so that even you have something that may be less than what you imagine, but something that people will pay you for. I would say that's where you want to get to, is paying customers so you have some income coming in, because that's actually going to help you go out and solicit more funding from other folks to say, we actually have some income, and it's sort of proof that your concept works. So I don't know if that answered your question, because there isn't any.
No, actually, it did, for sure. I think what I'm getting from this is that there should be there has to be some type of metric for
Yes.
the money and the time frame to work with. Because I think if it's just too
Yeah.
open-ended, I think either
Yeah.
money, time, energy is going to be mismanaged, and people are. I think things are going to fall to the wayside. And I just have one more question. I've
Yeah.
encountered different opinions about this. So when it comes to funding, often, family and friends tends to be a source for that. I was wondering if
Yeah.
you have an opinion as far as, if you're a startup, you're looking for funding, is family
Yeah.
and friends something one should do, or something one should kind of maybe approach with a bit of caution?
Look, I love the idea of bootstrapping where you're not dependent on other people. I think, money and family and friends, it's tricky. I know a lot of relationships that have gone
Right.
south because of that. I think as long as you're super clear upfront, hey, I would love you to support my venture. There's no guarantee here that you will get your money back. And
Right.
if you're upfront about that and the people that are involved understand it, that's okay. And then, if you're being asked to invest in someone, you got to know, like, you're going to lose that money. Not
Right.
that you will definitely, but you got a 90% chance you're going to lose it. So I do think that's the risk that comes with investing in anything. I would say if you're relying on other people's capital, you need to be okay with yourself that you are, I'm going to use the word, taking from other people, and
Right.
that does create some responsibility. And if you're okay with that, knowing that you could let them down or whatever, then go ahead with it. But maybe there are ways you can do it on your own, right? By saving, working part-time, right? So there are other options, and
Right.
you need to just sort of think it through and what your situation is, because I think it'll be unique for everyone.
Well said. And Lenore, I have to say, this was an incredible presentation, an incredible discussion. It was a pleasure to have you on today, and go through the
Thanks,
ins and
Adam.
outs of all of these factors, which are, yes, of course, which I think are very, very important, and I think they really need to be at the forefront of any and everybody's consciousness when they go into a startup. Don't have blind spots. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't just focus on the niceties of things. Look at everything, good, bad, the gray area, all that stuff. So, Lenore,
The
thank you.
last thing I would say is,
Yes,
honestly, you can nail some of this stuff down up front. I do strategy sessions with clients all the time, and it's possible. This doesn't need to be like a long, painful, drawn-out thing, but getting that clarity up front can be super helpful. So please feel free to reach out, connect with me. I would love to support any of you who are going through that process.
Well said, Lenore.
And I appreciate this opportunity to be here with you guys during this presentation. It's been a lot of fun.
And I loved having you on as well. And certainly having everything at the forefront. I think it helps people avoid a lot of problems down the line. So I really appreciate the emphasis in your presentation on that. So I have to pass the mic now to Javi to introduce our next guest. So
okay, thank you.